Hi guys, what's up? In this video, I want to talk about how to deal with really extreme blushing. As I'm sure you know only too well, blushing is one of the most uncomfortable aspects of having social anxiety. You walk onto a bus, you feel like everybody's looking at you. You walk onto a plane, you have the same experience. You have to get on stage. Even if you're just talking to colleagues or talking to people, for no reason sometimes it seems, your face just suddenly starts to fill up with that burning red sensation. I struggled with this problem for years and years as part of my social anxiety disorder, and I honestly think I had it pretty much as extremely as anybody possibly could. As you can see, I'm naturally very white, and I used to just go an unbelievable shade of red. It was as if every single blood vessel and every single square millimeter of my face was just completely bright red, and I would actually pour with sweat, and I would have sweat dripping off my brow, dripping all over me. And I also had hyperhidrosis, which is excessive sweating, which often goes along with this problem. And there are two ways you can tackle the blushing. So one is the superficial practical level, and the second level is the much more important one. It's the deeper psychological level of what's really going on in your mind, which triggers this excessive blushing reaction. My first tip for dealing with excessive blushing is to actually think about the colors of clothes that you're wearing. I have very white skin, as I said, and I remember I used to sometimes wear white hoodies and white t-shirts, and I remember I was in Seoul and I was on the subway and I was wearing a white hooded top, and then I asked this guy for directions in Korean. I was trying to show off and use my little bit of Korean that I'd learned, and he explained to me, but then I didn't understand what he'd said, and I just went so red. And I got on the train, I had this white hoodie on, and my face was just burning red, and the bright white hoodie really contrasted with my bright red face. This just accentuated the problem. So I would recommend, where possible, not necessarily in your everyday life, but if you know you're going to go to a meeting or whatever and there's a chance you're going to present, or there's a reason you may start to blush, I would recommend wearing darker colors, because it's not going to contrast so much with the redness in your face. And also, as I said, if you're blushing, there's probably a good chance you're going to be sweating as well. And I used to have problems if I wore lighter colored shirts. I would have huge sweat patches under my armpits and on my chest. So I always put a lot of thought into wearing darker colors if I knew I was going to be in those kind of situations where I might get very red. My second piece of advice is also related to clothing, and that is try and wear multiple thin layers where possible that will allow you to take stuff off. One of my worst situations was when I used to be locked into a very thick hoodie and I would be pouring with sweat and very red, and I couldn't take it off. So I used to buy zip-up hoodies that were often thinner so I could take that off, and I might have other layers that I could take off as well. And this allows you to actually vent and get a bit of heat out of the body when you're very hot and sweaty and embarrassed and red. My third point is also related to this concept of venting. So what I would do is do this. This is venting, and I would try to subtly, throughout meetings and so on, when I was working in the British Embassy and in other places, I would just try to get some air under my shirt to try and relieve some of that really excessive hot feeling that was going along with the blushing. So where possible, you can just subtly try and vent. And obviously, as I said, if you've got the right kind of layers and fabrics and clothes, this can also help with the venting. The fourth point is a topic which came up with a client many years ago, in fact, because he was also really struggling with excessive blushing. He used to have to give a lot of presentations as an entrepreneur and the owner of his own insurance brokerage, and he would go to lots of meetings, and we talked about there are places that you can actually find within meeting rooms and so on that will help you if you are getting red and getting hot and embarrassed. So try to pick a spot maybe that's nearer a window that has good ventilation, or that is also near the aircon. I would often try to find a spot under the aircon, and this just can really help in those situations where you're getting very red and hot and uncomfortable. Okay, so that's the superficial practical measures out of the way. And although these can be helpful in alleviating some of the symptoms in real time, they are only really a band-aid. And as with so much stuff I see out there about social anxiety, so much of it is based at the superficial level. None of it gets to the underlying psychological mechanisms that are going on that are causing this problem. What I found over years of experience and years of working with people is that the blushing problem that we have is related to a very overactive nervous system, and it can be related to the thought cycles and so on in our head. So someone will say something, we will immediately turn it into something embarrassing for ourselves, and then this shame and embarrassment reflex comes on, which is all this redness in the face. So the key to overcoming this blushing problem is really working with the nervous system, working with the thought cycles, working with the self-sabotaging behaviors and the underlying automatic negative thoughts and all of this kind of stuff, the much deeper level stuff. So first of all, in terms of just trying to deactivate the nervous system a little bit, you can do a lot of the things which I've touched on in other videos, such as alternate nostril breathing, some breath work, some yoga, some stretching, some meditation, mantra work. Really work on your diaphragmatic breathing, reset your breathing so that you breathe much lower in your body. Work on getting your energy down lower in the body so you're not all up in your head all the time. Cut out things that are going to stimulate you, like lots of news, lots of social media, lots of caffeine. All these inputs up here keep our energy focused up in our five senses in our head, which is where all the redness is. If you can start to focus down more, put your attention in your belly, which is your center of gravity, put your attention in your knees, your feet, move your energy downwards, do relaxing things like Tai Chi, which emphasize grounding energy and putting your energy lower in your body. This will help to actually just lower the reactivity of the sympathetic nervous system. In addition to this, you can also do relaxation methods, which I will put links to, lying in Shavasana, tensing the body and then relaxing it, progressive relaxation, all of these things just to get a taste for relaxation and learn it as a skill. Because most people that I work with social anxiety, and for myself in the past, I did not understand relaxation. I had never had it apart from when I was using drugs or alcohol or prescription medication, and it is a skill to be learned and it will really help you in this process. Right, so the second part and the most important part of this deeper aspect of dealing with the blushing is working with your thought patterns. I'll give you an example of what I mean here. I used to have so many automatic negative thoughts, self-sabotaging thoughts, horrible noisy things going on inside my head, lots of racing thoughts. My internal landscape was not a pretty place. It was not a nice place for me to be in, and it was usually geared around punishing myself. So I used to work in a kindergarten when I was in China. It was a Korean kindergarten, and one day the driver there said to me, "We're going off on this field trip. The kids absolutely love you." And I just started to go completely red, pouring with sweat, and he said, "Ni shang dao na chu la." It means like, where has your mind gone to? And my mind had gone to, oh, the kids love me. I hope they don't think I love kids. I'm not a paedophile. It's just classic peep show style self-sabotaging thoughts. And this is very candid. This is not what people usually talk about, but this is what goes on inside people's heads sometimes, especially when they have social anxiety. And it's just self-sabotaging nonsense. And as I learned over the years to actually be a friend to myself and not have these horrible thoughts or intrusive thoughts or punishing myself or all this horrible crap that was going on inside my head before, the blushing naturally disappeared by itself. The blushing is a symptom of all these things to do with what I've just mentioned, with the racing thoughts and so on, but toxic shame and feeling very embarrassed about yourself. Blushing is a shame reflex. So when you feel embarrassed, when you feel ashamed of yourself, that's when it comes on. So once you clean up your internal landscape, once you become a friend to yourself, an ally to yourself, you love yourself, you don't have this stuff going on. And as a side note, your thoughts all slow down and everything calms down anyway as a byproduct of that happening. That's when all of these physical symptoms start to die down. So all of this stuff you see on the internet about taking medication to stop the physical symptoms, it's really missing the point. It is totally barking up the wrong tree. You have to get to the root of the problem in the mind, which is where all this stuff is coming from. So in order to deal with some of these things, such as automatic negative thoughts, racing thoughts, self-sabotaging thoughts, you can journal some of this down. You can get some objectivity. Otherwise you take it or at face value. You believe it. You don't even see that they're thoughts. You're lost in it. So a first step can just be to journal and just to get your ideas down on paper, get some objectivity so you can see what's going on in your head and you're like, oh wow, I see. I have these mechanisms. Every time I'm in a nice situation, this horrible intrusive thought will pop up to sabotage my enjoyment. Oh, that's related to when I was a child, because whenever things were good, something bad would happen. So now I've developed this internal mechanism mechanism whereby I preempt the problem so that I stop myself enjoying it before I enjoy it too much because I'm scared that something bad's going to happen. That kind of thing, right? You can start to journal down and see what's going on inside you. There are also many other ways to deal with automatic negative thoughts and so on. A lot of it is related to self-esteem. When you're happy and you love yourself, you don't have these horrible things going on inside your head and these very negative scripts that we run. I talk about it in a lot of my other videos on this channel. You can check out Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. It's a very good book on just becoming a happier, brighter person and questioning some of your internal beliefs. But there's a lot of stuff on the channel that talks about these issues already. The other issue around blushing is that basically it's to do with embarrassment, toxic shame. We're ashamed of not just what we've done, but who we are as a person. Our whole thing is just shameful. We feel embarrassed about ourselves. And we're also often very embarrassed about subjects, talking about sex, sexuality, past experiences with sex, or could be anything. Like I say, our mind often finds a way to make a fairly innocuous, innocent comment into something intrusive and negative about us. Like, oh, does that person think that I'm a virgin? Or, you know, whatever it might be. I know it in myself, and I've seen it in so many other people and talked with so many clients about this. This is really what goes on and what people dare not talk about and what you don't see people talking about on YouTube videos. For me, I was super easily embarrassed, and you just have to be less easily embarrassed. You just have to have conversations more. Go to situations where people might be debating about sex and sexuality, if that's what embarrasses you, whatever it might be. Try to expose yourself in these situations, have a bit more conversation around that, whatever it might be. But you can build some exposure to this by having these kind of conversations, whatever the topic might be where you find it embarrassing. Maybe debate it online first on Reddit and then go to a meetup group or whatever it might be, or even just talk to colleagues more about it, whatever the topic might be that you find so embarrassing. And if the topic or the subject that really makes you embarrassed and makes you feel so red is actually yourself and your own appearance, then this is where you need to do work on self-esteem, as I've talked about previously, building love for yourself. Try and write down things that you can appreciate yourself rather than feeling that you're this loathsome, ugly person. So a lot of my redness was related to my self-consciousness. I hated the way I looked, so therefore if people looked at me, I felt incredibly self-conscious and would just get so red. And this went on right up until, you know, before I got my social anxiety handled in my early 30s. Like I said, I would walk onto a bus or a plane, and that feeling of people looking at me, I would get so red because I'm like, oh, I'm so ugly. Or if I had to get up to go to the toilet on the plane or in a classroom, I just would put it off until the last minute. I didn't want people looking at me because I didn't like my appearance. So a lot of this with social anxiety generally, and especially with this blushing, comes down to the way we feel about ourselves, especially personal appearance. So try and build a different relationship with your personal appearance, how you look. Instead of focusing on all the things you don't like about yourself, try and notice the good stuff. Like, I've got blue eyes, I've got reasonably good bone structure. You know, before I used to put all my attention on my big nose, big ears, lumpy forehead. You can change where you put your focus. You can focus on the more positive stuff, and then this kind of facial dysmorphia starts to shift. I had a lot of body dysmorphia and facial dysmorphia. I was very obsessed with how I looked. If you focus on the bad, that's what you'll see. If you focus on your lovely eyes, your good shaped lips, whatever it is, you will see more of that. So I would really recommend trying to go deep into changing your relationship with yourself and how you see yourself, because although it's superficial, a lot of our self-esteem and self-confidence is tied up in our body image and how we think we look. So related to this would be to actually also just get exposure with being looked at, whether it's going on a bus and just standing there and letting people look at you, or especially Toastmasters was very helpful for me, getting on a stage and having people look at me, and you just get used to it. And after a while, your nervous system does become inured to it. You get a kind of hardening of the nervous system because it's not such a shock. You just get used to people looking at you. Even if people think you're ugly, you just wear down that very acute reaction to it. My final piece of advice, which can also be used during these exposure practices or in any situation where you're getting embarrassed and blushing a lot, is to let it peak. To use, say, the airline example again, I would be standing up waiting to get to my seat, feel myself getting super red, and then you can start to get really worried about the redness. Oh, it's really coming on, everyone can see, and that just exacerbates it. I found a much healthier way, or a more helpful thing to do, was go, I'm feeling a massive peak of redness coming on, it's just going to have to run its course. I'm not going to fight it because that will only make it worse. I'm then building shame around the shame, embarrassment around the embarrassment. So just let it come on. It's going to get really red, like my whole face is going to get red, and then it's going to peak. But I would have also different degrees of intensity within that. I could have a lower shade of red if I just let it come on and go. Whereas if I really made a big deal of it, it could get so red, like the deepest red you could imagine. So I highly recommend just letting it peak. It's kind of a form of acceptance. You know there's going to be this physiological wave is going to come up. It's going to reach a peak of intensity, but then it is going to subside. If you start trying to interfere with that, try and cut it off, stop it, get embarrassed about it, have an internal dialogue that says, oh no, it's happening again, that will increase the intensity of the blushing, in my experience. Okay guys, that's everything I've got for you today on blushing. As I said, there's this side of the superficial practical level you can work on, such as wearing clothes, venting, choosing where you sit, all of this kind of stuff. But I highly recommend going much deeper into the actual thought patterns which are driving your social anxiety, the embarrassment, the shame, the toxic shame, the low self-esteem, the automatic negative thoughts, the racing thoughts, the intrusive thoughts, all of this stuff. Really try to get to the root of the problem, because I will tell you, when your mind becomes a happier, brighter, calmer place where you actually like yourself a lot more, all of this stuff calms way down. You don't have, it's the same with eye contact. You don't have this like fast, racing, scared eye contact. You don't have this jittery, very reactive nervous system which is going red and white all the time. Things just chill way out and you are calmer. And it just comes from being happier and brighter inside. It's like cleaning your mental garden up. Once you clean out those weeds and cut the lawn, things will be cooler. So try those out. Let me know how you get on. I'd love to hear from you. Please hit me up in the comments. Please like this video if it's been helpful and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys all very soon.